What up, y'all? This is Tracy from Nerd Squish, and today we're gonna talk about the 1932 Universal Monsters, The Mummy. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first video in a series of videos where I am going to sit down and watch and review the Universal Monster movies. I love these movies, I love these monsters, they're beautiful and they're just lovely. And I want to take the time to sit down and just talk about them with you guys. I've talked about the monsters in several videos on this channel briefly, or in countdowns and rankings and stuff, but I really want to sit down and delve into these pictures because they're beautiful and they need to be talked about. The first thing that's super interesting about The Mummy is the inspiration behind the film. The Mummy was the first movie that wasn't based off of a novel or a pre-existing story. The inspiration behind The Mummy was the 1922 real-life discovery of King Tutankhamun. Why can't I say that? King Tut's tomb. When they discovered this tomb in 1922, all these mysterious deaths and things happened, so all these people were talking about a curse that was happening. And Universal was like, we're gonna use that. And I kind of love that it's inspired by a real life story, whereas all these other things are just like, you know, based off of novels, based off of legends. But this one was like, you know, it came from real flesh, which, I mean, come on, that's just
spooky.
So in the movie, a bunch of dudes digging up some stuff because, you know, why not? Why not dig up some old stuff, release curses, and cause mayhem in the streets? What else is there to do? And naturally, the biggest mistake you can make, if you find an old ancient book, scroll, don't read it. For the love of God, don't read it. But what do? They read it. And your boy is in his coffin, he's chilling, and then all of a sudden, he's alive. He proceeds to meet a beautiful woman that reminds him of his former love that he sacrificed his life for. So, you know, what's the only thing to do? Well, naturally, we need to sacrifice her, do some like nasty mummy things so we can just bring her back to life, right? It just makes sense. I mean, that's not what you guys do for fun in your life with your romance? No? Okay, whatever. I don't judge. The thing that I find interesting is that it does parallel Dracula a lot. You have a monster who finds a sexy lady and he's like, hey, do you want to be my undead bride? No, of course you don't, but I'm gonna chase you down and make you do it. Naturally, all these other dudes that are totally alive, that totally also like you, are gonna chase after you and try to stop me, but, you know, I'm all powerful, but actually, I'm kind of really not. And do I really win in the end? I don't know. This one definitely doesn't. Also, I sleep in a coffin. Also, I hypnotize people with my mysterious, spooky gaze. So, I mean, he's like Dracula. Boris Karloff, I think, is more known for playing Frankenstein's monster underneath all that makeup. And the dude just has such an interesting face. So it's like easy to, he's spooky already, but like, I don't know, because of his gaunt look, like it's easy to make him even spookier. So what's interesting is that they glued all this cotton to his face to give him this, you know, mummy look or whatever. And he sat in the chair for hours with Jack Pierce doing this. However, they rarely really use the full mummified makeup in a lot of the, the close-up shot in the beginning of the movie, most of that is a wooden dummy. The only shot in that makeup that's actually Karloff is the part where he opens them eyes. Not only that, but you really don't see him, like, it's very briefly in the beginning. For the rest of it, you just see him, like, stunting around in his little fez and his little outfit. And he's a little dry and crusty, but, not full mummy. So you really don't see him as the monster that much. There's two big differences I find in this movie versus a lot of the other Universal monsters is not only do you not see him as the monster very much, but also the mummy is not focused on horror as much as I find the other Universal monsters. You could really argue that all the Universal monster movies in some way, shape, or form are a romance film, but this one I find more than any other. I mean, they really delve into this romance more than the horror. I mean, it's there. It's like the horror's in the background. It's it's back there. But to me, the scariest parts are when, they show up the close-ups of Karloff and he's just like in your screen like, and every time he comes up, I'm like, ah! In those scenes where he's like close up, like hypnotizing you, I mean, I felt hypnotized sometimes. I'm like sitting over there like, yes, sir, like sacrifice me and I will become your undead queen. He's terrifying. The dude has a face for this stuff. I mean, after all, they totally found him when he was filming another movie. He's in a suit, all gangstered up, and a guy was like, hey, you want to play a monster? Because that look, he just sells it. Karloff sells it. There's a reason he became like a face of horror, because he does it. He's already got the face, and then he's can act it. So, I mean, hello. Another part that was really terrifying to me, and I always find this terrifying, like even in the, 1999 reboot of The Mummy and stuff like that, the depiction, or just even the thought, because they don't fully go into it, but the thought of being like mummified alive, like being buried alive, like it's so scary. I mean, they're wrapping him up and you see him, kind of trying to struggle, and like, that's terrifying to me. That's so scary. Like, even though like it's obviously not as graphic as the 1999 version where they like throw the beetles in and the dude's being eaten. It's not as graphic as that, but just like the idea of it, which again, I think that's the scariest part, as this movie really is all about this romance that he sees this woman, Helen, and he's like, say girl, you look like my ex-girlfriend that died, and I want her back. And you got her soul. So this film was originally titled The King of the Dead, later changed to Imhotep. It did not get the title The Mummy until like right before its general release, which is interesting. I mean, The Mummy, boom, you know what this is about. But I'm not gonna lie, I like that title, The King of the Dead. One of the vintage original posters for this film held a record for the most expensive poster sold at auction in 1997 for $453,500, which is like, excuse me, who's buying this? Who's got this money? Because, hello, please, money. That record has since been beaten when I'm not sure which year, but a Metropolis poster was sold for $690,000, which again, who has this money? Give it to me, please. Overall, I think The Mummy is a very underrated and overlooked chapter in the Universal monsters. And I think a big part of that is because all of his sequels are not directly related to the original monster and his story. In The Mummy, we're talking about Imhotep, right? But in all these other sequels, it's a different mummy. It's a different Egyptian pharaoh dude. Whereas all the other ones, like, it's that character, it's Frankenstein's monster, it's Larry Talbot Jr., like, it's the same character. So maybe that's why he didn't have an overlapping story, or maybe it's because it wasn't as terrifying as a lot of the other films. Even though, I don't know, I think it has definitely really spooky parts, but I do agree, I think it is more of a romance film than a horror movie. I think this is definitely one that people need to get on board with. It gets overlooked. We talking about Dracula, we talking about Gilman, we talking about Wolfman. We always need to talk about Wolfman. But I think we need to talk about The Mummy more. It's a beautiful, beautiful story, and the sets are gorgeous. Like, I'm a huge fan of like that Egyptian stuff. Like, I just think it's so cool, and like the sets are gorgeous, and they do differ very much from a lot of the other monster movies. A lot of them had these big Victorian spooky gothic sets or little small town villages. So to have these like, you know, Egyptian backgrounds, it was different. Beautiful. It's beautiful. Like, can I live in a house that looks like that? Please, because secretly I'm just trying to live in the queue of Revenge of the Mummy at Universal. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on The Mummy. Do you like it? Do you think it's romantic? Is it spooky? Were you hypnotized? Also, let me know, when you think of Boris Karloff, do you think Frankenstein's monster? Or do you think The Mummy, Imhotep? Which one is an iconic Boris to you? Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll check you nerds later.